Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Scott Gustafson, General Manager, MilSatcom Division, the Aerospace Corporation, and Milcom Chairman to the stage.
Thank you, and I hope everybody had a great lunch. It's now time for the formal program to begin, and we're fortunate today to be able to hear from one of the nation's most respected military leaders, Brigadier General Dennis Crall, Director of C4 and Chief Information Officer of the Marine Corps. He is a career aviation command and control officer who understands the critical need for command and control from the air, ground, and sea, which provides him with a unique perspective as the Marine Corps CIO. He also has a strong operational background and served as the Direct Air Support Center Airborne Officer in Charge during Operation Iraqi Freedom and conducted 34 combat missions. He is also a key member of the new Deputy Commandant for Information organization that brings together the Director of C4 and the Director of Intelligence. Brigadier General Crall also has roots within the Southeastern Atlantic Conference as a graduate of the University of South Carolina, which showcases his drive and energy as the Marine Corps Director of C4 and CIO. Please join me in welcoming General Crall to the stage.
Thank you, sir. Well, good afternoon. I would say it's good to see you, but I can't see any of you. Got a lot of bright lights on, but that's okay. Look, I've got a few notes, and I was asked to speak on two topics, and I'm going to cover those topics, I promise you. But what I really am interested in is getting into a dialogue with you and leaving enough time for questions and answers. What I've promised you is, if I know the answer, I'm going to tell you the truth as I know it. For those of you who've heard me speak before, we've interacted, hopefully you'll find that I'll be as frank as I know to be with you. There's a lot of change going on in the Marine Corps, and I will tell you the change is fantastic. But that change will only be realized when we conclude it and we accomplish the missions that we're set out to do. So what I was asked to talk about, just very briefly, was to start off with kind of a services perspective as a CIO, and of course the Marine Corps in particular. What are some of the challenges we have in the Marine Corps, and how do I address that as the Chief Information Officer? And I'll share my thoughts there. And the other question in transitioning from that was to provide a little insight on what the Deputy Commandant for Information role means, not only for C4 and Intel, but also for the other warfighting portions of the Marine Corps. And I'm prepared to do both of those, and I'll move through both of those very quickly. And then on to our dialogue. I have a script. I rarely follow it. This is an exciting topic to me. And I'll just jump into it. What's fascinating is I do a lot of reading, probably like many of you do, and I really enjoy looking at the articles surrounding industry CIOs. And I'll be honest with you, I'm envious. I'm not always envious. There's pieces of it that I probably wouldn't relish, but for the most part, there's a few advantages in the corporate world that differ a little bit from military organizations, many of which you know, but I'll cover a few. The first of which is speed. I'm fascinated with how quickly a CIO can institute change in an organization, how it can make a decision, based on whatever analysis is provided, and then move on it. Never is a discussion that I can tell on the color of money that's involved in that change, which is a world I live in. Right? Whether it's PMC, I'm buying hardware, or it's O&M, it's labor, however that color of money is, I always seem to have enough money, but never in the right flavor. And changes in those flavors are extremely hard, as you know. So part of that really has a challenge, as well as our, seems to be habitual continuing resolution budget status that we find ourselves in, really makes it hard to do business with the military. New startups are difficult. We're always running in fits and starts in how we're funding, but what's interesting is we're adaptable creatures, and we've adapted to that over the past many years, and we're still functional. Industry has helped me solve many of my problems despite these challenges. But I've always been envious of the speed of my civilian counterparts. The other piece that's kind of a challenge is capital. I don't have a venture capital fund. I spent some time out on the West Coast recently with the DoD CIO and team, and I met a lot of startups. I met a lot of old companies that have been around for a while, big names in the industry. I've spoken to their CEOs, COOs, and CIOs, and it always comes back to that forecasting, seeing what's out there, taking a risk, taking a chance, and making that investment, which we call in our industry lead turning. Not a lot of lead turning. In fact, we do a lot of tail gunnery in the military. We see things that kind of sneak up from behind, even though we may have predicted them for a long time, and it's kind of like the adage we've had, after trying everything, we'll eventually do what's right. That's kind of our motto in many times. And we've been slow on the take. So we've got no capital fund, especially in the IT world, which hurts us. And lastly, I would say that our metrics, how we look at success, vastly different. In almost every conversation we have, we talk about money savings on the outside, and on the inside, on our services, we talk about warfighting capabilities. We talk about bringing something to bear against the adversary. Sometimes it's not cost effective. Sometimes we spend money for lethality, and often we do. It's not always a zero-sum gain or a cost avoidance or an offset. Sometimes it has to be looked at as additive, because that's how we look at value. And I'll tell you, when you're closing that last 100 yards, 50 yards, or 10 yards, you're not thinking a lot about the balance sheet. You're thinking about the lethality you come to bear. And we need to make sure that we have our warfighting prowess first and foremost in all we do. The other piece in that idea of metrics is some things we do on the tactical edge, they're not cost effective. Many of the solutions that we talk about work very well in garrison environments, in humidity controlled areas, where you can control static, light, temperature. Not many places in the United States Marine Corps exist that you can do any of that. In fact, we push all of our equipment and our people, our smartest weapon, our people, to the test around the globe, and we're deployed all over it right now. So that tactical edge component makes our metrics look a little bit different, and it should. One of the advantages we have specifically in the Marine Corps, and I told one of my new bosses, Lieutenant General O'Donohue, who came on board as our new Deputy Commandant for Information. In our very first meeting with him, I shared with him one thing that makes the Marine Corps unique in how we run the CIO-ship. And that is that I have two things under my control, and I believe, no matter what you read, I would challenge any other service CIO whether they own these two things completely. And that is the expenditures, our IT procurement process, ITPRIS, is run under me at a C4 in its entirety. The other piece is I am the authorizing official for the Marine Corps. So AO and ATO comes out of my office. Without those two throttles, everything else is just a pleasant conversation. Because if you talk about making change in your organization and you can't enforce that change through the policies that you have technologically and the policies that you have fiscally, you really don't have that mechanism of change. There are, by some accounts in other services, dozens and dozens of CIOs per service, sometimes based on weapon systems. Dozens and dozens of those who approve ITPRIS and like requests. The challenge remains for us to keep those together, and the pressure is always in terms of speed to divide them. And my guidance has always been, there's probably a better way to do business, but we need to make sure that whatever that better way is, we have some level of continuity and centralized approach to making that work. And so far, we've done fairly well in both of those, and I'll provide a couple examples. But really, this is our key to ensuring standardization across our networks, which we haven't had for some time. And we've been making some great gains on that. So one of those areas I mentioned was ITPRIS, the idea of how we do procurement and how we make sure that procurement speed it matches what the needs of the fleet are. And the way we've done it in the past, it was so centralized, you know, everything, even from a printer cable, couldn't make its way through. It required headquarters Marine Corps approval, not the model you want. The SecDef's office has been very flexible in working with us. We've been able to push some of that authority down to the requesting units and the right officials to the tune of $50,000 local purchases, which will be moved up to about $150,000, hopefully before the year is out. Same reviews, same checks and balances, same Klinger-Cohen statutory requirements that we're supposed to look at, we do. We just do it on the backside of that so we can keep up with speed. On the authorizing official or even on the ATO point, we're looking at providing authority to operate packages out of the box. Right now, it becomes a bit cumbersome. You have a piece of gear and you want it to join the network. You first have to go find the gear. The gear has an approval process, not just for purpose or purchase, but to bring it on our networks. You then have to look at how it's configured and what dongles or additional security measures are put on top of that. And lastly, the environment in which it operates. And in many cases, we operate in the same way, the same fashion, over and over and over again. Yet each time that process goes through, it's like starting over again. Burdensome, expensive, doesn't make us any safer. We're building now packages to actually incentivize compliance so that when you buy the gear that we've talked about that you said you've needed and it's in our catalog, and you hang the crypto or the devices on that you've agreed as a package or a kit, and you add it in the environment, in the configuration that we work through, ATO comes with it out of the box. Basically, the full purchase, from purchase to implementation. That takes care of things like our MagTab, our aviation handheld that we're looking at, and the software that goes on it, to our tactical handhelds for fire support and everything in between. It's a fundamental and significant change in the way we do business, but hopefully it'll increase standardization, make our network safer, and allow speed to fleet so we can get gear to them quickly without sacrificing our security. Those are two of the big changes we've made this past year. If you're wondering what our priorities are, they haven't changed. I have many priorities, but I have three top priorities that I see from my fighting hole. The first is comply to connect. And we've been working this diligently for the last 2 years, and I think we're making great headway on it. There are several components. There's a software component for us to see our networks. There's a hardware component for us to make sure that our network access controllers are in place to implement the change that we have. And the third piece that's in front of us is our installation processing nodes to modernize our data centers, reduce the number of core data centers we have, because I've got to get out of the human patching role. We've got to automate almost every form and feature of this. If you look at how the Marine Corps patches, there are certain services that may patch their systems 4 times a day. We might patch our systems fully twice a year. And we're not alone, by the way. We're probably par for the course. Too much human capital, too much human labor, too much cost for us to do this manually. We're also too slow in our responses for threats to our networks. Automated solutions is what get us there, and part of that solution means bringing in artificial intelligence to that fight so that we can look at our network smarter, we can see anomalies quicker, and we can respond in the desire that we need to. The second piece is looking at our mobility. I've talked a lot about taking our network and our data with us. We have such a reliance on data, and if you believe most scientists, we're on the cusp of a data explosion. In fact, I would tell you that cusp has already passed. We're here. Bringing on the Joint Strike Fighter, looking at the intel systems that we have and the amount it's collected and how we share, it's already here. And I can't take it with me. So when you think about Marines getting on the back of an Osprey, flying around to the other side of the globe, multi-aerial refueling missions, bringing a tactical processing node with them, the age-old question of where is your data, behind you, with you, or in front of you, the answer really is yes. It needs to be everywhere because we're going to be operated in a contested environment, and we are not prepared right now to fight in that environment. When we're disconnected, we're slow, and we're cut off. Can't live that way anymore. We also, in that same vein of mobility, we're taking a look at all modernized equipment with lower swap. We've gotten out of the business of our whole tropo field of systems, our Track 170s. They're modern now, smaller, a lot of competition. We're going to start buying that because we need to take it with us. We need to look at things like MUX, enhanced MUX, free space optics that give us an entirely new capability through the ability to send data across lasers. And right now we're limited because we're looking at curvature of the Earth, but here before too long, we're going to look at bouncing that laser signal off of some airborne platform to extend our range. Got to have it. That's how we fight on the tactical edge and increase our transport layer and make sure that we can take all that good information and push it. And the third priority, and these three have remained unchanged for almost 2 years, is wireless. We have got to do a better job at picking up our pace, and right now we're looking at wireless only from a maintenance perspective. We have on contract this year, we believe, to do about 74 sites across bases and installations. Those are garrison sites. But that's to allow our maintainers to not take hands off airplanes or trucks, but to be able to use their manuals to do what they need to under the vehicles, on the vehicles, order the right parts, look at the right material they need to fix them and increase our readiness. But you're going to see that need for wireless in a warfighting sense as we push to the tactical edge. We have right now the desire to do a lot of onboard processing of sensors so we can cut down on that transmission pipe. But once that pipe and that shot is made into an air combat intelligence center or some other like environment, we need to push that signal out even tactically in a wireless capacity. Should have been doing this years ago. But those are our three areas that we're focused on, and we're making headway in that. And I tell you, I thank industry, our partners in academia, for really helping us get there. And we're closing a lot of ground. And we'll see some of these systems, by the way, fielded. We expect the software aspect of what I described in Comply to Connect maybe to be purchased and fielded in the next 60 days. I expect the hardware component for NACR to be fielded probably in the next 90 days. Our solution for satellite connectivity through field expedient dishes and tactical processing nodes to be purchased in the next 90 days. And finally, the wireless contract is being looked at now. I believe we have that in our sights. So we have ways ahead for these, but we can always move much, much faster. So with that, I'd like to pivot and take a look at what this means now. So focus down the road of CIO-ship for us. I'm not sure you'll find it much different from the other services other than a few pieces that I described. But on top of this now, we have a new Deputy Commandant for information. And what that means for us is finally the ability to integrate a lot of these information environment-related activities under one roof. Whereas before, we haven't practiced them either at all, or we've practiced them so disparately that you couldn't find a common design. And what started this really was the desire to do this in the cyberspace first. We understand that at MAGTAF, specifically our MEFs, our warfighting center points, did not have the ability to provide an online presence to defend the networks that they take out with them. We fight one network, but we have those presences segmented in a few places. And the MEFs didn't have the prowess to baseline themselves to hunt on those networks and provide a level of remediation necessary for us to continue the fight. So these defensive cyber operations, DCO, IDM, these interim defense measure teams, are being created right now. So in this, looking at how we stand up a DCO IDM and provide that expertise for each of the MEFs, we started looking across the whole panoply of what DCI really encounters. So what are the other specialties that the Commandant has carved out in Force 2025 that we're going to stand up simultaneously? It's going to be all those that used to fit under the traditional IO or information ops umbrella. They include military deception, deception in support of operations, a subset of that, DISO. A lot of acronyms, by the way, in these fields, but they've largely been unchanged. Electromagnetic warfare is coming, that whole electromagnetic spectrum, for us to understand what our own signatures are, let alone what we're seeing, how to minimize, how to hide in plain sight, how to get quieter when we need to get quiet. Military information support operations, MISO, which traditionally has been left to other services to perform. We have a role. We want that organically at our units, all the way down to our MUs and all the way up to the MEFs. We want to be able to influence natively. That means taking that capability and putting that against the adversary without necessarily having to beg, borrow from other services to provide that capability. It also includes OPSEC, military deception proper, and under military deception, our special access programs and our special technical operations, our STO and SAPs. So the Marine Corps is no longer going to be a bit player in these, or a player that comes along after the fact. The Commandant has carved out over 3,000 boat spaces, 3,000 pieces of structure in our inventory. And by the way, this 3,000 pieces of structure behaves like almost 4 times that, given the seniority that's required in these fields. So think about the build and the cost to the service. For every major that I put in place in one of these cells, what is the dollar figure when you look at the annual pay, for example, as you try and port that to what maybe an E1 or an E2 would be when we continue to cost and cost out force? It's not an even trade. It's 3,000 that pays like 12,000 or 15,000. That's the kind of investment he's willing to make in this field, and that's what we're doing. Part of the challenge, as you might imagine, is how you start. How do you start this? Last time we checked, we don't have a lot of expertise in the Marine Corps in any of these fields. So the way you start, the boss asked me once, he said, where would you start? I would start with liaisons. If you offered me 1,000 individuals or boat spaces of untrained people, or 39 liaisons in the right spot, I'd take the liaisons first. Because many services are already performing this function, and initially, we're going to tap into that formally. So if you think about space, who does telephony for our government? Who really has the space segments? Who can deny space for the U.S. government? Letter agencies, there's Title 10 agencies, clearly it's 15, 18, 22, there's a whole bunch of players in this battle space. And we're going to tap into that initially while we grow our own. Same for MISO, same for MILDEC, same for STOW and SAP. So one thing that we've done is we've taken these groups, these information groups, these MIGs that we're putting out in the MEFs, and we're building 3 of them, 1 for each of our MEFs. And in those particular capabilities will reside the seed corn of all these fields that I've just described. And when we asked the MEF commanders what their problems were and what the big challenges, I wrote some of these down. So I'm going to give these to you. I don't think we've published these. They're probably not a shocker to you, but this is what came up in the top 10. I wrote down 4 that I thought were pretty good. And that is that these information capes are disparately developed and poorly integrated. We have no integration structure. It's a pickup game right now. 1 and 2 MEF look different than 3 MEF. And it goes on for all of these. Who does the training? Where's the schoolhouse? How do you test them? How do you make sure they're certified, qualified to do the job? All questions you expect us to ask. We don't understand our own signatures. We don't have a baseline. That was the second thing in our repository of networks. One of the interesting things about hunting networks is you've got to know what you look like. The way you find things on your network is you look for anomalies. But if you have no baseline, if you can't see yourself well, and you don't have the skill set to see yourself well, you can't detect change. And if you're fighting an adversary that's clumsy and sloppy, that works well. But if you're fighting the adversaries that we're up against, they're very good, and so, in fact, some would argue better than we are. You've got to have the upper hand through baselining and good training. There's a dilemma. This transport problem that I talked about, it's kind of funny. I know a little bit about electricity, and I find this problem to be a lot like electricity. I don't care how many neat devices you hang on the end. If you have one extension cord that connects it, and you dial up your amperage, and you start adding up how much is out there, one extension cord's not going to run a city. And that's kind of our transport layer today, is that we have wonderful things happening on the Intel side. We have mass integration of sensors like we've never seen. We have companies coming to us that can fuse just about everything in the planet. We now see more than we've ever seen in our lives. Our UASs, our drones that are taking 4K video from 9 different angles and packaging that, and we're going to these demos and we're looking at them, and the first, I'm the only guy in the room, I think, that looks at that demo differently. Everyone stares at it, and check this out. You can see it from every different angle. You can see it from the top, you can see it from the bottom. Every time you click on something, it's got a huge profile, it's in living color, it's 360, you can move around. I'm thinking of one thing. How much data is required to port what that person is looking down the other end of the pipe to the person who says they want it? Every time I go. Each system that we look at seems to exceed the capability that we have in our transport layer today. Even when we fuse it, even when we try and do onboard processing in some of these, the requirement is so overwhelming. We've got to get our handle on what is needed and how we push that information to the commander who needs it. And then lastly, desire to equip ourselves with modern C2 systems. For every new system we bring on board comes with a vulnerability. And many times those vulnerabilities aren't known until the adversary gets a chance to study it. We do a good job in our labs, and we do a good job red teaming, but the best job is done when it's in the face of the enemy, and the enemy gets a vote. And we've got to be able to react very quickly to how we patch, how we repair, to make sure we don't bring risk on. Those are just 4 areas. So when you see what DCI is doing, there's 4 lines of effort that General O'Donoghue is going to focus on for us that are critical. And they're simple, but it's complex. So improve MAGTF lethality. You would expect that at the top. Lethality, influence, and survivability. That's what we're looking to do. Increase the Marine Corps competitiveness in the battle of signatures, which I've already mentioned. Integrate and professionalize the information operations community, and develop and maximize the capabilities of information environment Marines. So here's where I'm just going to speak off the cuff and let you know how this works. I'm going to give you a little inside baseball. Because when you talk this information environment, you get real excited. Because we read in the news about little green men, and we read about Russia, and they've been involved for a long time. China's got a good I/O capability. North Korea, to an extent, has a fairly interesting I/O capability. We've always been late to the party. For some reasons, good. We have a government that values many of the amendments that we have that we hold dear. And we want to make sure that we're not administering any of this against a Western audience. So those are good things, by the way. Those restrictions and rules, what makes us unique. Our adversaries don't have any of those considerations. They really don't care what's pumped out in the environment. But you think about a bunch of Marines getting ready to embark on what may be one of the most transformational times in recent Marine Corps history. And so they're starting to look at, well, what do these people do? How many do we need? And everyone's talking about new tool sets and new toys. And, the truth of the matter is, it doesn't start there. It starts with things that they don't necessarily want to get involved in right away. The first is law. The first thing we need are lawyers. Because this really means the lexicon that we have is already steeped in Congress. We have to make sure we're talking the right language. How many times have you heard of operations that have been planned and never executed? Authorities that sit distant on the shelf, never to be utilized because we've never crossed the right wickets. Words matter in this field. The second thing we have to look at is our measures of effectiveness, not measures of performance. But Congress, rightly so, is keenly interested in how we spend our money. And we've got to show them value. Years ago, I/O, information operations, was the darling of DoD. We were going to talk our way at it rather than killing our way through our adversaries. And we realized that we didn't really keep good metrics. We couldn't account for the money properly, and I'll make another prediction. If we don't do better in the cyber arena, we're almost close to that right now. 3, 4, 5 years ago, if you just mentioned cyber defense, you would have people handing you bags of money. Not anymore. Congress, rightly so, wants to know, and we should be definitely caring as good stewards of our taxpayer dollars and how we spend them. We've got to do better in MOE. So for all the planning we're going to build on these MEFs and in these MIGs, it really starts at home to make sure we've got a good, accountable structure. We're on the right side of the law. Authorities will come when we demonstrate competence, and we've got to grow those individuals from scratch while we rely on our partners for those other title authorities through L&O-ship to help us with fires as we grow our force. I was asked very plainly, does this DCI integration help you from where you sit? And the answer is a resounding yes. Bringing Intel and C4 under one umbrella, especially with the leadership of a 3-star, puts us on par with a lot of our competitors and peers. It's the right representation at the right time for the right mission. And make no mistake, this is all about warfighting. And this is an area that the Marine Corps needs to excel in, because whether we want to admit it or not, our adversaries are steeped in it, they're ready, and they're already showing an advantage. We all would wish that if we have to make that fight, not that we wish for the fight, none of us wish for war, but if we have to make it, and we have to go through it, and we got to fight it, we want every advantage we can on our side. And right now, this is the trade space that our adversaries know they can't stand up head-to-head with us. So they're leveraging this, and they're excelling. They're exceeding our capabilities. So it's a rich time for the Marine Corps, rich time for our nation as we start to grow these. And hopefully that provides you insight in a couple things. Our CIO ship, the bringing on of DCI for information, how we fit under that, and some of the challenges as we move forward. So that's my 2 cents to you, and I look forward to your questions. You can save all that applause until I answer your questions properly, right? And then if not properly, we'll revisit it.
Thank you, sir. The first question is, what are some of the emerging technologies coming out of the U.S. Marine Corps Warfighting Lab that will be key for future battles?
Key for us right now is how we're trying to digitize the Marine Corps. So we're looking at how we push information. That's really what the Warfighting Lab is starting to inform right now. So I teased a little bit about this, about tactical handhelds, for example. How do we push information to the warfighter at that pointy edge? So two things we're looking at. How do you do that just in an environment where it's potentially permissive? And then how do you do that in an environment where it's restrictive? So this next set of war games, what we've asked for is, we talked about our military, our Marine operating concept, how we fight into denied area. But you know, the truth of the matter is, Marine Corps doesn't have a lot of experience in practicing what I just said. We've been able to pick and choose, for the large part, how we deal with that restricted environment because we set it. Future battlefield may not be so kind. We might find ourselves, and likely we'll find ourselves, denied. So I've always harkened back to, when was the last time we did an operation where we shut down our networks? We're talking at the table today, what does a conversation look like if space was denied? Be a pretty quiet one, right? But we have some tools and we have some tricks, but we don't practice them enough. So we've asked the Warfighting Lab to go back and set us up some exercises to walk through that and bring on technologies that bridge that gap. That's what we're really looking for. What does a warfighter really need? For all this Internet of Things and all the data that I shared, it's about being smart. It's about taking only what you need, processing only what you have to process so that it works at that tactical edge. And I'll tell you right now, to handle that morass of data, to take that commander's intent, shrink it down, and make sure that it fits on our pipes, it's going to take an AI solution for us to do that. And that's what I hope the Warfighting Lab brings out really in high notes for us so that we can put our investments behind it.
Thank you. The next question is, we heard a good presentation on military satellite programs this morning. Can you elaborate on the priority needs for the Marine Corps in space?
We can, and I'll do that maybe in twofold, right? First of all, I'll tell you that we're very excited about MUOS. I think there's a tremendous opportunity here, given the type of satellite we're talking about and the fact that we believe it'll be more survivable than maybe some other means. So we're clearly dependent on space, just like everybody else is. But I'll tell you, space has two different pieces to it. One, we talk about protecting our own so that we can fight. I think we've probably spent most of our time talking about that. I'd like to shift gears a bit, though. I want to deny space to our adversaries. And I would also like to use space in the IO realm in ways that we haven't used and probably can't talk about largely in public, but has a role for how we fight. There are numerous space-enabled IO activities, just like there are cyber-enabled IO activities. And right now we have services who practice this very diligently. They have amassed great capability. They can provide a level of manipulation that we haven't seen before. If you look at how the progression of this has worked over the years, we used to look at space denial that would be evident to the user, meaning that we would brick devices. When you expect to connect, they wouldn't connect. When you looked at GPS signals, they just wouldn't be there, or your device would be in an endless loop, not able to provide its calculation or processing. The adversary has stepped up that game. The most dangerous way of spoofing now is having a device that appears to be functioning perfectly, yet the information that it's portending to give you is erroneous. That's the next level of gamesmanship, and most of that is done right now through RF, but our adversaries have found ways to do that through the space segment as well. Very dangerous. Protecting our own, but using that same capability against the adversary, I think are game changers for the Marine Corps as it moves forward.
Thank you. Could you discuss the Marine Corps movement to the cloud regarding opportunities, challenges, and progress?
Wow, that's a, yes, I can. And I think I would use all of those descriptors because they've been opportunities and challenges and we've been slow. Here's the piece that's really important. Anyone who's ever argued this, I try and share this with my bosses. Every time we look at a capability, it's a recipe, not an end, not a singular thing that would be the game changer, but it's the cocktail of those things in combination. For example, a cloud means very little to me. What really means something to me is mobility. And the cloud is a piece of that recipe. It's an ingredient in that recipe that gets me mobility. So if you give me all the cloud in the world today, and my applications don't behave right, what do I have? I have a cloud that I can't use the applications that I need to because they're not mobile-based. If I have the cloud, but I don't have the repository of my data, or I can't push processing where I need to, then what I have is just another intermediary waypoint that I can't do what I need to do. So what I really need is mobility. That's the right answer. And the cocktail, that recipe for mobility has many different ingredients in it. One, it has the end user devices I just shared with you, whether it be tablets or phones. We're about to have our second tablet summit down at Cherry Point, North Carolina, here in November, which should be monumental for the Marine Corps. We have mapped out every handheld application we can think of. And we're finally going to slap the table on how we're going to tame that zoo of exploding end user devices. We're struggling right now on how to do mobile device management. So for some of you out in the business that want to give me some advice on MDM, I'd love to hear it. But we're struggling on how we do this on the explosion of that tactical edge for these devices. Cloud is an area that we think we've tamed to a large extent. We had cloud by last Christmas, not the cloud we want. We want secure cloud on-prem. We want to hold the data. I want to be able to move the data. That was hard 2 years ago. It's not hard anymore. Many of you in industry have come to me saying that they're willing to work it as long as we have the correct FedRAMP facility to put this in, and we're making headway there. The security controls that go on that, very important. The application development, making sure that the right developer's toolkit is in place and the applications behave. You know, I make fun of some of them. I won't make fun of it here because there'll probably be some sensitivities. But we have some applications in the Marine Corps that I'm guessing you could guess that do not behave in any environment. None. Zero, let alone the tactical edge. What's the advantage if I put them in the cloud? What's the advantage on recruiting if I'm looking for a mobile solution and I put those applications in a cloud and they're not accessible, they're clunky, they're quirky, they don't work? So in making sure that we go through from a funding perspective, I'm asking for not equal funding, but funding across all of those 4 key areas I just mentioned, because that is one step forward in mobility for the Marine Corps. It involves tactical processing nodes, small signature microwave dishes, better end user devices. And I may treat those end user devices as disposable, consumables. I have printer cartridges that cost more than some of our tablets. And yet we're treating them like programs of record. And they're slow to get, slow to secure. When I can buy them, use them, and dispose of them. That's the kind of thinking. So cloud, integral part. That's how we're going to move our data around. And that's how we're going to deposit data in our cans that we take with us in these tactical processing nodes. But I think there are more opportunities today than there were before. There are better form factors for tactical processing nodes. Our network access controllers are easier to operate, smaller, and we finally have at least a lead handle on the types of applications we're going to design and develop.
Thank you. Where can industry assist relative to your greatest communications gaps?
Well, if we talk communications gaps, I would look at C4 writ large and really C2. I'm in constant need of help. If you ask my boss, he would admit that, right? I'm always in need of help. That may be his direct words. But I'm in help in all the areas that I just mentioned. I'm looking for better ways. I know we're a tough partner sometimes, but I'm interested in technology that'll help solve problems. I want to do business differently, less people, more automation. So if you're thinking data handling, how I make sense of structured and unstructured data through AI, I'm interested. Smarter networks, software-defined networks, ways that we can reprogram and reconstitute very quickly, rather than the age-old burn-in that I'm doing right now. I'm very interested in, and I saw, I don't know how many venture capitalists when I was out at DoD CIO West Coast trip that had things I would never even think of, that they're thinking of. The identity assurance. How can I tell it's you on the other end? How do I do better processes to handle my workflow for enterprise service desks? How do I change my workflow? I'm doing a zero-based review right now because I'm trying to, every bureau, every division, center, and cell that I have instituting and administrating my network is archaic. I want a better way to administer the network. I want a better design. A lot of the design that I'm getting is old think. Everything that I just described, from a better way to compute, a better way for cloud storage, how do I do cold storage? The Joint Strike Fighter is going to amass so much data, I don't even know what the legal requirements are going to be for me to store that data. One division's worth, 20-minute flight, 4 airplanes. I got to put that somewhere. So after we go through it and the Intel analysts look at it and it's STO, SAP, SAR, TS, SIPR, or secret, and then unclassified, how do I handle that storage? Am I allowed just to get rid of it, or will 2 years, a year later, someone say, pull that up, I want to see the signature change in this flight profile that we mentioned or managed? I have no idea. Right now, I got to keep it all. I don't know how to keep it all. Those are a few challenges that I'm having, right? Just a couple that hopefully we could solve by the end of the day.
Thank you. The U.S. Army has transitioned to enterprise mail. The Air Force has airforce.mil, Navy has navy.mil, and Marine Corps has USMC.mil. The Coast Guard has moved or is moving to enterprise mail. Should the military adapt to enterprise mail as the standard and outsource those areas that are not a core competency? Or should the military maintain unique addresses to potentially reduce the scale of a cybersecurity attack or compromise and continue to own and operate their networks?
Okay, so there's really three questions in that. The middle one is the tricky question, and that is really who administers it. Should we contract that out? I'd like to start there, and then I'll work back on the whole DOS ECAPS flavor that we're working. And the last piece for security, I'm game. If a USMC.mail.mil is not the right extension, I think we'd get over it. The last time I saw so much craziness in the Marine Corps was the weekend we thought we would go to sew on rank rather than pin on rank. Don't ask me why, it's just a Marine thing, but I thought there was a full-on revolution in the Marine Corps that we are not doing sew on rank. I don't know why, we're just not going to do it. But outside of that, this next one was USMC.mil was kind of the next great area of conflict and compromise. So this is what I would say is that the industry standard, I'd like to move to it right now. There's been some recent things in the news about testing on some of that. We probably need to do a little more testing to make sure our enterprise email system works as designed. There's some security issues in that. But overall, you're not going to get a fight out of me. We just got to be ready to do it. And the Marine Corps can't do it partly. It's got to be all in. What I'm really in need of is a way that we make sure that we tame our Active Directory when we deploy. That's my big concern. It has nothing to do with Garrison. What I do in Garrison is easy. And I'd go to it tomorrow if I didn't have 1 foot on the DOS ECAPS front and 1 foot on mail.mil or USMC.mil. So I've got to make the transition. I probably got to make the transition all at once. So again, I'm not too concerned about the transmission from one to the other. I'm very much concerned about how we do that and whether or not I can manage it properly when we do. So I'm a little concerned in that aspect. And we're working it out. We're moving in that direction. What really concerns me is the tactical edge. I've got to be able to push information. I've got to be able to find people. So when it comes to contracting that out was the comment, and do we move to something else, I want more people in green suits at that tactical edge. We made a commitment years ago. We had a contracted, owned, and operated network, NMCI, and we got out of that. And we said we would have a government-owned, government-operated network, and we've never done it. We're getting there. We're making progress, but we're not there. It's a lot harder than most people think. And it takes time to build it. And it's a complex network. And all the failures take place on that tactical edge. That's where the challenge is. So we're making strides in that, and I want more Marines to administer it. I want more Marines to have the security control over it, and I want them to make sure that no matter what happens, I can push that information to the right person, right place, right time. And it's not just about email, as I'm sure you all know that, not lost on this crowd. We fight on chat. Right? We do. We fight on chat. We fight on a collaboration tool suite that's out there. It's not just about sending emails. These are war-fighting tools that I need to make sure I can find you. And right now, our Active Directory challenge is real. I have trouble putting that stack into a box and taking it when I'm forward deployed. And I've heard a lot of promises, and I've had a lot of industry partners come in and tell me they could tame it, name the service in a box. We're not quite there yet. So in the three parts, yes, the Marine Corps is moving to an enterprise email when we can get there on time, and hopefully sooner rather than later. 2, I want more Marines on that end. I don't want to outsource that piece. I want to take great ownership of it and hopefully be able to administer that better on the tactical edge.
Thank you. Is the Marine Corps still pursuing bring your own device as part of its mobile device strategy?
Yes, and not fast enough for me. In fact, I will just tell you right now, our whole mobile device strategy is not good. I don't find that we're moving at the pace we need to. I don't think I'm on the right trajectory, and we have to make a significant change. So I thought by now I would be into the GFE side, our government furnished equipment issued, that I would be using full Android and iOS devices, and that I would have gotten off of our BlackBerry hardware, and we're just too slow. We're too slow for a host of reasons. And the DISA solution appears to be a good one, but it takes me back to the same problem that I have. If I'm going to use a DISA solution for this, I've got to be on a DISA enterprise email solution as well, or I can't make the two work very well. So I'm stuck, to be honest with you. The testing has taken too long. I don't think I'm on the right trajectory, and we haven't even talked about BYOD. That's simply GFE. I'll tell you where we're hurting the most. While we can talk warfighting all day long, I have ways around that. But where I'm hurting the most on the BYOD front is on our recruiting force. Our recruiting force doesn't want my government-furnished equipment. They want to use their equipment. They need a highly mobile configuration, an application that helps them with selling. They need the devices that go along with it, their own. They need a BYOD solution for that. And we just struggle. I think I have the funding for it. I just have not found the right solution.
Thank you. What is the Marine Corps doing in terms of updating its organization structure and acquisition processes to embrace multi-domain battle concept that other services are championing?
Well, we're doing a couple things, right? Part of that in multi-domain is integration. And I mentioned, I won't mention the companies by name, but there's been an explosion in industry in fusion and integration. And I'll tell you what's exciting to me. If you had me speak on this subject 6 months ago, I would say something entirely different to you. And what I would say is I think it's a hoax. Integration, we're not there yet. Because when I see boxes that come together to pull disparate bits of information, they're so complex, they're so proprietary, they're so fragile that it takes all of my expertise to keep them alive, and their ability to translate information was not really good. It seemed to be a ruse, almost. I'd get a new Fusion box, they'd drop it in front of me and say, check it out. You can take these 20 different waveforms, these systems, these inputs, and on one screen, there's your cop. And then I opened up the curtain and looked what was happening behind there. That wasn't even accurate. Very fragile, a lot of attention needed to it, very fickle, didn't hold up when anything changed in that environment. If the data was slightly latent or came in a different field, it threw everything for a loop. I'll tell you right now, that's no longer the case. I've seen 3 demonstrations, and frankly, they come out of academia. 3 demonstrations that showed the ability to do this in ways that we envisioned years ago. I think we're on the cusp of seeing real change, real integration across that multi-domain, because here's the real challenge. What are you going to do with all that information if you can't process it? I can put a camera on every spot on the globe, and I can try and put that somewhere in a repository and tell you to go hunt. And by the time you figure out where it is and what it does, you're done. It's over. You've got to find a way that we bring you that right information that's already broken down in a meaningful way. And I'll tell you, I think we've got it. I think we have some shining examples. That's what the Marine Corps is going to invest in. That technology of bringing disparate information together in a way that is reliable and that it can work in some challenging environments.
Thank you. Are you required to fully implement the end risk management framework for your system's cybersecurity and AO approvals for ATO and ATTs?
Yes, we are. We're no different than anyone else. How we do that, by the way, is probably wouldn't surprise you either. So we follow that framework. I'll be honest, though, parts of that framework you can drive a truck through. It's not as tight as maybe you would expect it to be. And there are some questionable pieces of that for value, but what it's driving at, I think, is noteworthy. It's all about balance. When it slows the system down and it drives us down roads that don't really address how we fight in a warfighting environment, not helpful to me. But yes, we participate. We're looking at it through the same lens everyone else is, and I think the utility of that has been fairly positive.
That was our final question for the General. Please join me in welcoming Lieutenant General Bob Wood back to the stage to formally thank General Crall.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't think we could have asked for a better presentation to start us off at MILCOM as a keynote. General Crall, thank you very much. I saw some people taking notes, but frankly, probably everybody needed to, because it was a definite description of priorities, needs, initiatives. There was just so much in that. And a good time, by the way, to advertise that there is an AFCEA YouTube channel. You will see this and find it on YouTube as it gets posted, as we finish this, and Signal will have it blogged out tonight. But great content, hunting on the network, the lines of effort you described, MIGs. I got at least a new acronym out of it for sure. That's great. But remarkable honesty and straightforward talk from a warfighter. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you appreciated that and would again thank General Crall for his presentation. You know, some of you are from academia, and maybe you picked up those 3 solutions for integration he was looking for came out of academia. And that's exactly the DNA of MILCOM. This combination of the technical and the academic with the military and the commercial is really the magic of AFCEA. And then MILCOM and the event that we've run for years with IEEE. And out on the floor out there, we're going to turn you loose in just a minute. You have the opportunity to find those solutions that are being presented. General Crall, you're certainly invited to go out and see if you can find 1 or 2 of the solutions to the problems you presented. Now we're going to, frankly, move up to a variety. Let me see the wing boards right now. We've got a variety of actions I just want to highlight as we take off. These particular have to do with our sponsors, and we want to thank them, our exhibitors and sponsors. And we want to thank them for what they've done. I'd like to give special thanks to Aerospace, represented by Scott Gustafson, General Manager, MilSatcom Division, for sponsoring today's luncheon. And I'd also like to recognize Sienna, represented by Jeff Varant, Vice President, General Manager of CGSI. The Boeing Company, represented today by Rico Atanasio, Vice President of DoD and Civil Space. Northrop Grumman, represented today by Mark Beaver, and from Northrop Grumman Aerospace Systems, he's the MilSatcom Director. Finally, with those thanks, I'd also want to thank our volunteers who have helped us get this up and running as usual, and with great skill and great dedication. Thanks to our volunteers. Now, there's a variety of things going on this afternoon. Let me just give you some orientation. First, there's dessert out on the exhibit hall, which will run till 2:15, so we ask you to go out and enjoy the exhibit hall, which is now open for your viewing. And during this break, the first set of concurrent theater sessions will be presented in the exhibit hall starting at 2 p.m. In the MILCOM Theater, we have a session on compliance hurdles, addressing the requirements that stand between industry solutions and military deployment, something that's probably topical to all of us and certainly within our experience. Moderated by Ray Potter, CEO of SafeLogic. And in the Team APG, Aberdeen Proving Ground Theater, we have a presentation on achieving unified mission command, the common operating environment. We have heard a lot about the common operating environment. I would tell you that in that presentation, industry will learn of the middleware that CCOM and Aberdeen have found that will help us bring industry solutions into the military COP. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd ask you to take a look out there. There's also a variety of programs that will go on in the technical program, as they began this morning. It'll conclude this afternoon with paper presentations, tutorials, and technical panels, all on the 3rd floor of this conference center. And our first plenary panel will be back here at 3 o'clock to 4:30, and it's a plenary panel here we brought from the technical program. We looked at the content. We thought it would be of great interest to the combined audience. Train Like You Fight, using MET, TC, and defensive cyberspace operations training, moderated by John Schleifer, Vice President, Cyberspace Business Development of ByLight Professional IT Services. This evening at 4:30, we will have a welcome reception to all of us. Please plan to stick around to network with your fellow attendees to view the technology and solutions on display from our industry partners before you head out and continue your conversations for the evening. Enjoy MILCOM. Enjoy this community. The solutions are around us, likely in the conversations we have, but also too are the opportunities that are presented for all of us to help solve. We thank you for attending lunch today. Thanks again to General Crall, and I ask you please, we've got dessert for you in the hall. Thank you very much for being with us.